Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. Now, before you click off and immediately write a comment saying how terrible my opinion is before I've even spoken it, actually hear me out. I've heard a lot of discourse around Runic, and more specifically, how bad it is. I have heard countless tales of how incredibly annoying Runic is, and how it shouldn't exist, and how fountains should be banned, etc., etc. And I am here to vouch for it, which is a terrible idea, and I know that I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but I genuinely do believe that Runic is a well-designed deck. Now, let me get this out of the way. Yeah, Runic stun sucks. It's unfun to play against, and it is incredibly annoying. Having a deck that entirely centers around not playing the game and skipping battle phase, which is one of the key mechanics in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's one of the main phases, it's one of the things that actually matters, is annoying. But this is one of the few decks that actually does something different for its win condition, right? Now, of course, floodgates are not fun to play against. You basically say, oh, I don't get to play the game and stuff like that. But overall, the actual design behind the Runic cards is pretty interesting and is actually very dynamic in the way that it interacts. And on top of that, the way that this deck has developed has been one of the most interesting in its development. It has had a myriad of other interesting decks to pair alongside it. Think Sprite, think Furhire, think Naturia, think a myriad of other decks as well. Runic has had a wide stint of competitive play, and the reason for it is because you can basically just use this as a whole bunch of instant fusions or hand traps, which is really interesting. Now, the main thing that I see a lot of people have about this deck, or hate about this deck, is the actual main effects of all of the Runic cards, which banish cards from the top of your deck. Now, this is obviously frustrating. People don't like their cards banished, but here's the thing. Throughout the history of Yu-Gi-Oh!, there has never been a deck that has ever been competitive that is a mill deck, that is designed to mill your opponent out of cards, right? There have been a few instances where that has been a viable option, but not necessarily the best option, right? Or even a good option, right? For example, if you get Maxed with your Shizu cards existing, yeah, you can kind of just deck your opponent out. You mill a whole bunch of cards with like a zombie vampire and the Ishizus and stuff like that, and yeah, you can then mill your opponent out. But that's because of Maxi and not due to actually milling your opponent, right? And it's not taking place over multiple turns. It's basically one or done because your opponent just drew a million cards. You're not really going to play a second turn. Like, you just have to win right there. And that is where I think that Runic as a design actually is very interesting, right? Overall, Runic Tip is a very well-balanced card. It's a free search, sure. It's a quick play, sure. And it also interacts with the opponent, technically, because of the fact that it banishes. But it is a hard once per turn, and that's kind of all that it does. It does the same thing that every other Runic deck, or every other Runic card does, which is trigger Fountain, while also being able to special summon if need be. Right? So, again, in theory, very frustrating, very annoying. But, like, it's a control strategy. It has to do something much more powerful than a combo strategy. I mean, look at what Sprite does with a singular level 2. So, yeah, all in all, I do agree that Runic is relatively annoying. Yeah, having your cards banished is frustrating, and that's actually what I do enjoy about it. Yes, it's not, the most fun to play against every time, but at the very least, it's interacting with me most of the time, unless, floodgates, but again, we've already mentioned that. But actually, Runic cards are pretty dynamic, right? Yeah, you do have to deal with freezing curses, which negates an effect and banishes, but it's also just a control strategy. A singular Ash Blossom kills the deck because they just lose out on advantage, and they can't really keep up, right? There's a myriad of other ways to interact. For example, if you have non-targeting on your cards, you can just protect your cards by knowing that they can't be targeted, right? If you have protection from destruction, you can deal with that. If you have a board wipe, you can deal with that. If you have like Cosmic Cyclone or something along those lines to deal with Fountain, there's a great way to deal with that. Now, with that being said, this is where I think, again, it becomes very interesting with Runic, right? And why I do believe, genuinely, Runic is a well-designed deck. It's one of the best decks at giving the actual player options in what they want to protect themselves against without fully giving them entire coverage. For example, Hugin does protect from card destruction, which is great. A lot of things destroy. And it also protects not just your set cards, but basically anything that you would have in your back row, as well as your field spell. Great, that's fantastic. It does kind of need this. With things like Lightning Storm, Harpy's Feather Duster, and the myriad of other ways to board wipe your opponent, it's kind of necessary to have that. On top of that, you kind of need to play around things like Evenly Matched, so giving them access to an incredibly powerful Fountain, which allows them to basically play their cards from hand, is way good. That's so powerful. And it's, again, one of the reasons why I think a lot of people do hate this, but it's also almost a necessary evil, because if you are playing a control strategy in 2023 and are setting cards in the back row, they better be Floodgates or Godlike, because you're getting nothing from them. Because you're just going to get Harpy's Feather Duster, you're going to get Lightning Storms, you're going to get Evenly Matched, you're going to get the Red Reboot, so it can't be a trap. So this is a brilliant way to counteract that. Instead of having to set the cards, you just gotta protect this one card, which is where Munin comes in. Sure, you could have Cosmic Cyclone, or MST, or something like that, or something that just targets and deals with it, mostly Cosmic Cyclone, and Munin protects that. If you can protect from targeting, that's also very great. However, you can't have both Hugin and Munin on the field at the same time. So you can either protect from board wipes, or you can protect from targeting. You can't do both. Again, a very interesting gameplay dynamic for Runic, right? On top of that, Gary is a great card to protect them from just immediately dying to battle. It gives you protection because it can't be destroyed by card effects, which means that it's more difficult to deal with. You kind of have to walk into it and actually deal with it in combat, which also then triggers its secondary effect, where if it's destroyed by battle, you target a card in the field and destroy it. Great. Guess what? It's targeted destruction. Two things that are very easy to avoid, but also it's during the damage step, and it's a control deck. You don't actually have to go to the battle phase, but it does kind of force you to go to that battle phase, and then also lose advantage. Again, it's a control deck. It already is losing advantage simply by being that, right? You're much better off playing a combo deck just because they are significantly stronger. They're able to end on more interactions, they're able to just end the game in a singular turn, and they're able to slow your opponent down way more than control decks do. So of course a control deck has to be insane in order for it to function. And this is where I think a lot of the Runic cards become contentious. Tip is just a free search. Insane. It also does additional stuff. It's a quick play as well, so you can search on the opponent's turn as well. That's crazy. Guess what? It is a hard once per turn, and it's not searchable. It's not like you're constantly searching it. And yeah, it is a way to search, and it can search basically anything throughout the archetype, but it kind of, again, does need to do that. You need to be able to find things like Flashing Fire, or Destruction, or Freezing Curses, depending on what your opponent is doing. Do you need to destroy a card, or do you just need to negate it? Maybe you need to destroy a back row. Maybe you need protection from the opponent's attacks. This is where all of these cards really work well. Okay? Now, I will agree, having your stuff banished is very annoying. Having your stuff just willy-nilly thrown out because your opponent happened to get lucky and banished your 2 of branded fusion, and both of them are now gone, yeah, that sucks. But so does losing to Called By, which is also at 2. So there's that, right? So does losing to Max C. So does losing to a myriad of other things. Do you see what I'm getting at? Like, yeah, it is annoying, but it's also a well-designed deck that kind of needs to do that for its primary function to actually work. right? Like, the idea is you lose resources so that I can keep resources myself and be up on advantage on you, right? If all of a sudden you just didn't lose anything and I just continued to loop resources, that wouldn't do anything. I need an end game, right? Now, that's basically it, right? Runic is pretty well designed. Yes, it is annoying to have your stuff banished. Yes, it is annoying to play against stun, and I won't disagree with that. But Runic is one of the most well-designed archetypes in the game. The fact that Runic has become basically a combo extender is very interesting and has really facilitated a lot of very interesting decks. For example, bringing life to Furhire. If you didn't know, Runic Furhire is literally one of the best decks in the TCG. Why? Well, turns out drawing a million cards is pretty good, especially when the cards that you draw into also kind of are hand traps. That's pretty strong. On top of that, throw in the Sprite engine to end on an even better board, because guess what? Hugin happens to be a a level 2, and all of a sudden, you're off to the races. On top of that, we've had a myriad of incredible formats due to Runics, right? Runic Sprite, the Runic Furhire, Runic Naturia as well. All of these have facilitated some rather interesting back and forth dynamic formats, such as when Runic Sprite was meta, when Tier was meta as well, being able to actually give competition to Tier just due to the natural advantage that was generated by the Runic cards, as well as a myriad of other things, right? So, while I do agree that it can be annoying to play against, I will never say that Runic is not well designed, or that it shouldn't exist, or that Fountain should be banned. I know, it's wild, but no, Fountain is absolutely a necessary cornerstone to one of the most well-designed archetypes ever. And I will die on that hill. I genuinely do love this archetype, and while, yes, it is not fun to ever see the opponent slap down a Fountain on the opponent's, or on their field, I will say that I'd rather have it than not have it. So, there you go. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you are still here, leave a like, maybe? You probably already hate this, so you could also leave a dislike. Tell me, let me know what you guys think. Because while I definitely think that Runic is one of the most interesting and well-designed archetypes, I know that that is not everyone's opinion. Actually, no, don't tell me, because I genuinely don't care. I know exactly what you're going to say, and you're going to say that I'm crazy, and that you disagree. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye. Shout out to the Frost Guard, my members. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy the content.